Thank you. Can I declare the meeting open to the public? Can I advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online? Can I advise members and those in the public gallery that they are welcome to use mobile devices as...
I think there might actually be people coming in at the moment.
Okay, no problem.
But when they're in, they can hear it.
Yeah, sure. Alright, can I advise members and those in the public gallery that they are welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode, and all devices are muted. Just check my own phone. Attendees can also connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi, and password details are available on the gallery rules. It is not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. Can I advise members that it is proposed the joint oral evidence session on reasonable chastisement and equal protection with officials from the Department of Justice and the Department of Health will be recorded by Hansard, and can I seek their agreement to do this? Members content?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can I remind members that they are obliged to declare any financial or other relevant interests that might reasonably be thought by others to influence their approach to a matter under consideration. Any member who have interests to declare in relation to today's business should do so now or when the particular matter arises. So can I ask members whether they have any interest to declare at this stage?
Chair.
Go on ahead, Danny.
Yeah, could I just immediate family member works in the probation board?
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 3 then is draft minutes. Can I inform members that draft minutes of the meeting held on Thursday 23rd of October 2025 are at pages 62 to 70 of the meeting pack. Can I ask members if they are content that the minutes are a true reflection of the proceedings of the meeting held on the 23rd of October?
Content.
Yeah, okay. If that's the case, then I will sign the minutes. Even a big gap there means that my signature gets bigger. You encourage me. Okay, any matters arising out of those minutes? No matters arising out of the minutes. I move then to agenda item number 5, the Justice Bill, Reasonable Chastisement, Equal Protection, Department of Justice and Department of Health Joint Oral Evidence Session. Can I refer members to pages 72 to 124 of the meeting pack? And there is no table pack this week. Can I inform members that today the committee is receiving oral evidence from officials from the Department of Justice and the Department of Health in a joint evidence session on the equal protection for children by the removal of the defence of reasonable chastisement. The officials providing evidence today are Andrew Dawson, Director of Criminal Justice Policy and Legislation Division, Department of Justice, Dr. Oisin Martin, Co-Director, Strategic Planning and Performance Group, Department of Health, Pamela Mooney, Social Work Lead for Family Support and Safeguarding Children's Team, Strategic Planning and Performance Group, Department of Health, and Natalie Whelehan, CEO of Children in Northern Ireland. You're all very welcome to the meeting. Can I invite you to make an opening statement? Andrew, are you?
Yes, I will, and I think Natalie may have just something to add when I've finished. So thank you very much indeed for your time today and for the opportunity to brief the committee. As you're aware, the current law in Northern Ireland on the physical punishment of children is based on the concept of reasonable chastisement. Article 2 of the Law Reform Miscellaneous Provisions Northern Ireland Order 2006 has the effect of restricting the grounds on which the defence of reasonable chastisement can be used. This means that if a parent or adult smacks a child and is prosecuted, they can defend themselves then in terms of reasonable chastisement, but only provided that the harm is minor. The defence of reasonable chastisement has been repealed in Wales, Scotland and Ireland, and it remains in force in England and here. The Justice Minister here is supportive of repealing the defence in Northern Ireland. She has met with, among others, the Children's Commissioner, representatives from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, and the NSPCC. In its policy paper then from 2024, the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health made the case that One, children who experience physical punishment are 2.6 times more likely to experience mental health problems than children who do not. This from a 40-year longitudinal study in New Zealand, which was published in 2023. The college also made the case that children who experience physical punishment are 2.3 times more likely to go on to experience significant harm through more serious forms of physical abuse. That was from an article in the Journal of Surgical Research from 2006. And the college also made the point that there's evidence to suggest that children who are physically punished are more likely to believe that violence is accepted and encouraged by society, which may lead them behaving in a more violent manner in adolescence and adulthood. And that was a quote from an article in the International Journal of Children's Rights from 2017. The Royal College has stated at this time in respect of Northern Ireland, quote, "It is time to bring protection from physical assault for children in line with the protection afforded to adults." For its part, the NSPCC in a February 2022 policy briefing stated that there's overwhelming evidence that physical punishment is not effective in managing children's behaviour, is linked to a range of negative outcomes for children, and is a key risk factor for physical abuse. An NSPCC survey of public attitudes at that time found that 65% of adults and 71% of parents support legal reform, with 14% of adults and 8% of parents considering physical punishment to be an acceptable form of discipline. For our part, we say that removing the defence of reasonable chastisement is not about creating a new offence, nor is it about criminalising parents. It's recognised that if the defence were to be removed in Northern Ireland, it would be essential to provide support and guidance for parents to enable them to use other non-physical methods to chastise their children. And my colleagues may be able to elaborate more on some of those points during the session. I think it's also important to note our view that if this was to be planned for repeal, a period of implementation would be desirable, if not essential, to raise awareness of the change in the law and to inform as many people as possible of the change in the legislative position. This was the case in Wales, which had a 2-year implementation period. We feel if that was to be the case, it would assist in reducing the potential scenario of parents being criminalised. The public would be aware it would be at that point against the law to physically punish a child, no matter how minor that chastisement may be. It would also give criminal justice agencies and other affected organisations the time to prepare and put measures and processes in place well in advance of any change to the law. Just to conclude my remarks before I pass you over to Natalie, in terms of the legislative position going forward, the Minister had sought executive approval last year to remove the defence of reasonable chastisement as part of the Justice Bill. There was no executive agreement at that point to include that, but you will be aware then that a notice of amendment to the Justice Bill has been tabled by Mrs. Guy to abolish the common law defence of reasonable punishment here. I'll pass over to Natalie at that point.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Natalie Whelehan. I'm the Chief Executive of Children in Northern Ireland, the regional umbrella organisation for the children and young people sector here. We have a broad membership of almost 140 organisations, and it's my pleasure to be here today to talk about a service that sits at the heart of family support, Parentline Northern Ireland. Our Parentline service, which we're contracted to provide by the Department of Health, plays a key role in providing positive parenting support and advice to parents. Parentline is a free, confidential, universal service for anyone caring for a child or young person in Northern Ireland. Every year, thousands of parents and carers reach out to us, with over 7,000 contacts in the last financial year alone, reaching families in every trust area through our phone line, web chat and email channels. Our service is truly multi-channel, making it accessible to busy families wherever they are and however they feel most comfortable reaching out. Open Monday to Saturday, it provides non-judgmental listening, practical parenting guidance and signposting to local services. Parents contact Parentline about a wide range of issues. The most common themes include child behavioural challenges, screen time and tech, child and adult health and well-being, including mental health, education and school-related concerns, co-parenting and the everyday pressures that come with juggling family life, stress, work-life balance, relationship difficulties and feelings of isolation. Every day, Parent Line hear from parents who are struggling with children's behaviour and challenges in family life. Parent Line provides parents with strategies for positive discipline, ways to set boundaries, manage behaviour and reduce stress in the home in a positive way that encourages connection between parents and carers and their children. The approach taken by Parent Line is compassionate, non-judgmental and person-centred. Parent Line helps parents find their calm, regain their confidence and strengthen relationships at home. It's one of the most compassionate and effective forms of early intervention we have in Northern Ireland. The principles that guide the service are grounded in positive parenting, early intervention and connection over correction. Parent Line helps parents to understand that their child's behaviour is a means of communication, a way of expressing needs and emotions. It focuses on giving them the practical tools to respond calmly and constructively. Our parent support team offer one-off help via telephone call, follow-up one-to-one support, signposting to other sources of help or support, online workshops, discussion groups and information sharing by providing some of our expert resources such as our go-to resources, our Parent Line Pathways Guide, a copy of which I have with me, and our newly published Parent Well resource supporting calm connections between parents and children. I have copies for the committee with me. We're very proud to partner with NSPCC Northern Ireland and its Take 5 Seconds Positive Parenting campaign, an initiative encouraging parents to pause, breathe and find their calm during challenging moments. The campaign's message is simple but powerful. Staying calm isn't just good for parents, it's essential for children's well-being. Through our workshops and resources, we're helping parents across Northern Ireland to put positive parenting into practice, strengthening family bonds, improving emotional well-being and creating calmer, more connected homes. The partnership between NSPCC Northern Ireland and CINE reflects a shared vision that every child should grow up in a home free from fear or violence, and every parent should feel supported and not judged. Our approach is twofold, pairing education and support with clear public messaging about what positive parenting looks like. The Take 5 Seconds campaign provides parents with simple, evidence-based advice, small steps that make a big difference. Pause and breathe before you respond. Calm helps children feel safe. Keep it simple and steady. Children learn best through calm repetition. Stay connected. Small moments of warmth build trust and support helps them grow. So talk through feelings together with your children. But remember, most of all, as parents, you're not alone and help is always available. So these are gentle, realistic messages that parents can put into practice straight away, and that's why they resonate. Small actions can make a big impact. Ultimately, Take 5 Seconds is about more than managing difficult moments. It's about building a culture of calm and connection at home, at schools and in communities. When parents feel supported, children thrive. At Children in Northern Ireland, we believe every parent deserves to feel supported. And when we invest in parents, we invest in children's futures. So whether it's a moment of crisis or just a need of reassurance, Parent Line is here to listen, to guide and to remind parents that they're not alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie, and thank you, Andrew, for that, for keeping it so concise. Thank you very much. One thing before I hand it out to members, can I just seek clarification from the department that you are content and support the amendment as it is written, all 5 sub-clauses?
So the department, I don't think without executive approval can have an official position at this point. The Minister has taken it to the executive. The executive has made its position clear.
Which is?
The executive position is that it does not support the department bringing an amendment to the Justice Bill to get rid of the defence of reasonable chastisement.
Yes, but now that we have an amendment in, is the Minister then minded to support the amendment and all the sub-clauses?
I think we are getting into a space at that point whenever I think we're into ministerial code and those sort of decisions as to what a minister can do in respect of supporting a backbench amendment whilst being a minister in the executive. So
we'll have to make a decision.
We are, I suppose, if I can say what we're in the department preparing to do, which is we've seen the text of the amendment and we are seeking advice on how that will be best incorporated in the final version of the bill. To come along. So whilst it's a backbench amendment, I think we will take an expert legal view of our own as well as to whether that amendment will work in practice. and then when it comes to the further consideration stage of the bill, if the amendment gets that far, then I think we'll be better qualified at that point to outline what the position is. So sorry, that sounds really mealy-mouthed and evasive on my part, but
well, let me ask you another way.
Yeah.
Is there anything in those sub-clauses that causes you alarm at this stage?
From the point of view of the department, there's nothing that causes alarm at this stage. There may be a need, I think, just to do a further bit of, if I can call it, due diligence on our part in terms of whether it will have the desired effect if it is eventually passed. But there's nothing that causes alarm at the moment.
Okay. Brian?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your attendance today and your explanation. Certainly it is to be strongly welcomed that society's attitudes to physical punishment have changed within all of our lifetimes, and the injury of children is not considered acceptable, and they should be protected in law. Parents are rightly now, as you've explained, encouraged to use other techniques in adjusting children's behaviour and in discipline. The question before us of this amendment, I am strongly concerned, however, that it has the potential to criminalise any physical touching of a child by a parent. I do think the parent-child relationship is an important one, and it's not the same as other adult-child relationships. Adult parents have primary responsibility for the raising of their children. So I do think, whilst we will all agree that we don't want to see children being physically punished, we end up with a change to the law, a very brief change, which will potentially criminalise parents if there's any physical chastisement of a child done in any circumstances, done in a loving way. So that does cause me real concern. There's reference there to how the law was changed in Scotland and Wales. I think that was done through an entire bill, rather than just through an amendment to a bill, which we have here brief. So would you have concerns about that? For a fundamental change like this would need some longer legislation rather than something so brief which could be inadequate?
Sure. No, I think the reasoning about bringing it into the Justice Bill is sort of a multi-subject Justice Bill anyway, so it has a number of unrelated but justice-specific issues. I think this would then be classed as one of those if it was to be brought forward. I don't think there's any difference in the vehicle that it would be brought under, whether it was a bill on its own or whether it's part of its clauses within a multi-subject bill. I don't think that's much of an issue. I think what's key is if you were to bring it forward as part of the Justice Bill, the Assembly might wish to think about staggering the commencement date of it, to allow then for any sort of implementation planning period. So you wouldn't necessarily have to have all clauses of the bill coming in at once. You could maybe look at making it later in respect of the reasonable chastisement if you felt that an implementation period was possible. But in terms of the vehicle itself, I don't think that's an issue for us. But anyway,
push further, even in terms of the amount of public engagement, public consultation. Mm-hmm. When you have a standalone bill, it receives much greater attention. There's a consultation process, there'll be evidence taken, opportunity for scrutiny. Sure. Whereas an amendment on such a fundamental matter which reaches into every family, I would be concerned that it just doesn't give society that opportunity to think this through and to be consulted.
Well, it's a fair point. Again, I think it's an issue that's been well aired. I think it would be aired, again in public once the amendment came to be discussed. But it's right, I suppose it'll be up to the Assembly to choose whether they feel when the amendment's moved, whether there has been sufficient public debate and discussion on it at that point. from a purely legislative process point of view, however, I don't think it's an issue. But again, it'll be for the Assembly to decide on whether you feel all members have the, I suppose, are satisfied that it's been well enough aired.
Well, can I ask too then, again, thinking, well, elsewhere where these changes have been made, Wales and Scotland in particular, has the department carried out any formal assessment on how many additional social services referrals and police investigations have arisen from those changes based on the experience elsewhere?
Yeah, no formal assessment yet, primarily because we have to just concentrate our resources on executive agreed policy for the most part. So no formal study, and I think there would probably need to be something formal as this progresses. However, I can give you what information I do have at the moment. So in Wales, the Welsh Government prepared for the removal of the fence. As I mentioned, they had a 2-year implementation period. They put a comprehensive strategy in place. They had public awareness campaign. The Act that abolished the defence requires the preparation of 2 reports on how the Act has been implemented and made effective. One of those is due around the end of this year, I think, and then another is due in 2027. In terms of the one that's produced this year, we'll certainly be studying that very carefully in terms of the effect there. The Welsh Government, as I understand it, also collects data from Welsh local authorities, the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. So I gather that the CPS monitoring data from the Welsh Government, the last full year available is for that of 23-24, and of cases that relate to cases that have been charged under the Children Abolition of Defence or Reasonable Punishment Wales Act 2020. That number isn't actually published because the number reported of cases is fewer than 5. So that would then pose a risk to personal information being disclosed and identified. So what I can say in respect of Wales and the prosecution numbers, it's fewer than 5. The Welsh Government had also set up an out-of-court parenting support grant in March of 2022 in preparation for the Act coming into force. And that grant provides funding for bespoke parenting support, which the police can refer people to as an alternative to prosecution in cases where the police feel an out-of-court disposal is more appropriate. That support, as I understand it, is designed to encourage and support parents to adopt positive parenting techniques along the lines of what Natalie covered in her presentation. From 2022 to date, we understand that 365 individuals in Wales have been referred to that scheme. 335 have taken up the offer, 310 have completed the scheme, and 265 of those have reported a positive outcome. Again, we need to look at that. Again, I'm no expert on the Welsh system, but it seems from that there's an element of discretion for the person charged as to whether they participate or not. Again, I think we would need to have a look at how that would work in practice here. So that's the position in Wales. In England, as you know, the repeal hasn't been made, but as I understand it, the Department of Education there is looking closely at how the Welsh experience and the Scottish experience. In Scotland, they also removed the defence of reasonable punishment in 2020. That change in the law came into effect upon royal assent of that bill. So they, unlike Wales, they didn't have an implementation period. There was no lead-in time. There was no public awareness campaign. So I gather, again, and we'll look at this more closely, I gather there was an initial impact on police and social services caseloads. But again, that's... I think that as time has gone on and it's bedded in, I think the experience has improved. And as I understand it, there are no statistics available on the impact of the removal in Scotland. But social services in Scotland have reported that there was an initial spike in child protection cases, but that levelled out and now numbers remain very low. Again, I think before we would do anything, I think we'd want to examine those numbers carefully. Just to complete the picture, in Ireland then, in the Republic of Ireland, the common law defence of reasonable chastisement was abolished in 2015 under the Children First Act. Again, we might just do a bit of work with with the Irish government in due course as well, just to find out how that has worked in 10 years since, but we don't have any further detail as yet.
And just one further question on that. Have you any indication on the cost implications of making this change in any of those jurisdictions?
No, I have nothing in front of me today on the cost. We'll certainly be looking at that as well. I imagine that with a proper lead-in period, the bulk of any cost would probably be in the public awareness campaign, the advertising. If it's planned carefully, we would seek to minimise the impact on police and social services as much as possible, and therefore avoid any major costs to them at that point. So I think, just again, talking today, I think that's where the most any expense would be in public awareness.
Possibly in additional cases though as well.
Well, in a similar vein to Andrew, I'd taken a bit of time to access official Welsh data, and there was an allocation of £2.4 million between 2022 and 2025 to the aforementioned out-of-court settlement programme. But as has already been mentioned, there was no surge in prosecutions, as had been typified as a concern in some quarters. Going further back in time to the experiences in Finland in the early 1980s, the evaluation of the impact of the repeal there was that it was really important to clearly delineate professional roles and responsibilities and expectations. And I suppose here in Northern Ireland we have a very well established corpus of policy guidance in and around that describe how social services in tandem with the police manage allegations of child maltreatment. And speaking from personal experience as a practitioner and manager for many years, I mean, I have to say that the application of judicious decision making is well established as a tenet between social services and police. In that regard, there is no intent here to needlessly criminalise parents, and I think Natalie has spoken very eloquently in relation to the overall conceptual framework being one of trying to promote an approach to parenting which achieves a bond between parent and child, which doesn't sort of resort in the application of force. And the application of force is setting the locus of control external to the child. And really what this is about is trying to encourage the child to make that journey towards self-actualization by regulating themselves. So I appreciate there are deeply held philosophical views and concerns in relation to this, but the direction of travel is in the direction of society being increasingly intolerant of the physical chastisement of children.
Okay.
Just before I bring Patsy in, I want to, Andrew, keep you on the referrals to the out-of-court parenting support supply grant when you have it in front of you. 30 individuals didn't take up the offer.
Yeah.
What happened to them?
Again, I couldn't say for certain. I think there would probably have been a variety of outcomes, and I think that would be something you would want to look at as MLAs in terms of the discretionary nature of taking that up. You'll also see, for example, that 30 individuals didn't take up the offer. A further 25 of that then didn't complete the scheme. So I think there would need to be consideration given as to what the cause and effect of that would be. I think you'd need to have quite a bit of encouragement for participation in it, if it's an alternative to out-of-court disposals. But again, I think that would be something that the Assembly would need to satisfy itself on at that point, as to whether you would introduce more of an element of making it mandatory.
You think they went back to court?
Excuse me, sorry?
You think they went back to court?
I imagine probably some of them did, but again, I just couldn't say for certain. They're dealing with relatively small numbers there as well, so again, I'm not sure the extent to which the Welsh Government would be able to give us extreme detail on all of them, but certainly we will ask the question and report back to you.
Social services involved in the parenting support grant?
Yes, so they are one of the bodies to which, as I understand it, then there would be referrals made and they would be on hand to provide support to. So again, you would need to look at whether that would be something you'd want to replicate in Northern Ireland. If so, then the DOH, I imagine, would want to just look at the potential cost of that as well.
Do we know out of the 365 individuals, how many of them were grouped as parents, as a family?
No, I don't know that. But again, we can see if we can find that out.
Out of the 265 reporting a positive outcome, what does a positive outcome look like?
Yeah, that seems to me to be something probably subjective on the part of the people who participated in it. So it was the individuals themselves that reported a positive outcome rather than the authorities reporting a positive outcome. So I imagine that would have been fairly subjective to each of the individuals there. But I suppose this is a bit of a crass analogy, so apologies for it in advance. It might be, again, it's not of the same importance, but it might be the sort of case of, instead of you getting 3 penalty points on your licence, you do the speed awareness course, and that would be a positive outcome for you as the driver, in the sense that you don't have 3 penalty points on your licence. There's no prosecution. You have picked up some additional information. So again, it's not a direct analogy. It's not the best analogy, but I suppose I imagine that's what they would have seen as a positive outcome.
What are the 7 individuals that didn't report a positive outcome? Do we know what happened then?
No, again, we can try and find out for you some more detail.
If you're involved with the police, first of all, if you were to witness somebody physically chastising a child, either out in public street or in their own property, what are you advised to do?
As a bystander, again, I'm not entirely sure of that position. I don't know if colleagues would.
I mean, I think in practice this doesn't happen as often as you might think, but one of the particular challenges that arises in social work practice and child protection is dealing with allegations where people want to remain anonymous, and that type of scenario that you've outlined.
There is Crime Stoppers.
Well, yes, there are anonymous phone lines that people can phone. I've been aware of that myself through practice, particularly out of hours. But the responses that are enacted to that type of referral, in my experience, tend to be judicious, proportionate. Frequently you're engaging with parents who have complex issues that need to be taken into account in the wider sense. But it's difficult to be prescriptive about what the advice would be, because sometimes you could be encouraging people to intervene and that would not be the correct thing to do, because they could foment an even more complex situation or put themselves in harm's way.
If you think there's a criminal act taking place, you're advised to ring 999. Would that be the advice of the Health Department and the Justice Department on this case?
Yeah.
To ring 999? Okay. Patsy?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of wee items of clarification. Specifically in regard to the change in the law, was that fully supported, because I'm reading here about there was no cross-executive support in the issue, was that fully supported by the Department of Health?
I will allow colleagues maybe to answer. Again, I think there was no real issue identified.
I don't think we're in a position to answer that, Patsy. We can look into that and feedback to the committee.
You don't know?
I don't know, no.
Right, no, because it's obviously if 2 departments working together, one isn't supportive of the other, it would make a bit of an anomaly of a situation, wouldn't it? Now, thank you for that. It's important too. The next thing is then, back to the amendment, which is very important as well. Does that amendment reflect the thinking of the department, which the DOJ that is, which has brought us to this point?
It reflects, I suppose, the position. This would be a fairly, I'm not going to say easy, but it would be a fairly simple change to the law to make. So there's not much difference that could occur between us and anybody making the amendment, because it's essentially a fairly simple amendment. Again, we don't have any official thinking because there's no executive support for it, but again, we have no issue with it.
I'm not asking whether there's executive support. I'm getting obviously you've spent a bit of time on this at the DOJ.
Yeah.
Obviously you've got a feel for the issue at the DOJ. We've had briefing papers on this.
Yeah.
All I'm looking to know is, someone somewhere, and you said that you're sending it off to the legal people and looking at consequences and all that. So someone somewhere, especially yourselves, if you spend a lot of time on this, should have an idea. Does that reflect there or thereabouts what the department thinking is on it?
It reflects the thinking that we brought to the executive for approval.
From the department?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
No, that's okay. That's all I wanted to think.
Sorry, I'm very aware, sort of tiptoeing around maybe difficult constitutional issues here, so apologies.
Well, no, you're representing the DOJ
Yes.
at the end of the day, aren't you?
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
No, that's
So-
what I'm asking you about.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Patsy, thank you. Danny, on screen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank yous. And I'll try not to pull you in the political side of it, because look, it is having to come through as an amendment because clearly hasn't been allowed to go through the executive from the Justice Minister herself, and it's probably could be said that for the criminal age responsibility could be another amendment that would come forward from a backbencher. The supposed question I want to ask on that is that, look, I've experienced recently through the education committee that, you know, even committee amendments may not get accepted, so they may not end up on the floor of the assembly, and this may not end up on the floor of the assembly even to be debated. The speaker doesn't choose it. So is preparation work happening between the two departments so that if it does, then it can move forward at a pace, but obviously we'll need a lead-in time. And what would you recommend as a lead-in time?
So there is early preparation ongoing. So as I mentioned, we will take our own legal advice on the amendment and whether it will do the job it's intended to do. I think we are a few months out yet from when this would actually be debated. So committee stage ends on 26th of March, and then we have the consideration and stage, I think, at which that would be the opportunity for this amendment to be moved. So you're talking around after Easter time, I think, at the earliest. And between now and then, yes, we will be working with DOH just in preparation for what both of our departments' response to the amendment would be. So that's both in terms. Sorry to interrupt. That's just in terms both of the legal position and any practical implications on the health side and social services side.
Yeah, and I was just going to lead in that as another reason why I caveat it with it may not even end up on the order paper, and it's something that children's rights advocates have been championing for a very long time. I just wondering what sort of next steps could there be then in an education piece for parents, because it wasn't too long ago that it was accepted for teachers to chastise children in the old days of a cane, and then you still get them remarks. So I hear it even within my own social circles that a wee smack didn't do me any harm, but we know the harm that it causes. It is physical, and certainly if someone were to physically attack any one of us. And that's the reality here. They would face ramifications, and that's what we want to prevent. We want to prevent this physical harm on young people.
Again, colleagues from DOH and Children and NI might be better qualified in terms of the content of what would be involved in any public awareness. I think just for our part, I think we would be keen just that it would be well designed. It wouldn't just be done by us civil servants on the policy side who don't really know how to communicate that well. But I think we would probably certainly seek some professional advice on it.
I mean, there's a considerable number of parenting programs that are already in situ, and we've heard a little bit from Natalie about some of the framework that she's been instrumental in developing. And I suppose the answer to your query is what we would be seeking to commission and bring into being is an extension of that, more of the same. I don't know that we would be seeking to commission or pull out of the ether a distinct programme of intervention for people who smack their children. I think this is about trying to promote positive behavioural support for children, and is pretty much an extension of that sort of conceptual framework that places the child as central. And one of the things that had occurred to me in preparation for today's committee is, the amount of work that's taking place to try to provide in-reach into the schools and to promote a sort of scholastic environment where children are assisted in dealing with anxiety and issues at home. And you hear the narrative from teachers all the time, and I'm sure you've heard it in the Education Committee, that so much time has to be invested in managing the social issues in the classroom before you can actually get anywhere near the curriculum. So I think what we're trying to do, and what we will be trying to do, is develop that sort of synthesis. We've seen initiatives like the emotional wellbeing teams for schools, where we're trying to equip our colleagues in education with the sort of theoretical and conceptual tools to manage those issues. But a very important point was made earlier on, that the starting point for an awful lot of this needs to be at home. Yeah. So it's not just about creating a programme for people who maybe are referred to social services or the police because they've been observed physically chastising their children. It's about trying to get more parenting programmes out there. And as we're sitting here today, I know that 7 out of the 29 family support hubs are reporting areas of unmet need across the province in relation to the capacity to develop parenting programmes. So we really need to dial into that and augment and develop what is out there.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Danny. Connie, on the screen.
Thank you. I think maybe what I wanted to raise probably maybe has been covered already, but I think the input from the Department of Health on this, I think, is something that's really important. We've seen that real input they've had where this has happened and this legislative change has taken place in other jurisdictions, and I really appreciated the contributions from children in NI and the other organisations that we have briefing paper from them in our packs there that support change. And I think I would just be keen to hear a bit more about any work that the Department of Health are already doing to support positive parenting interventions, and how they have maybe been working with other jurisdictions following the submission of this amendment if it does pass.
Okay.
Well, I think the framework through which an awful lot of the integration with the community and voluntary sector is walked out into the region is through the Children and Young People Strategic Partnerships and the Family Support Hubs. And they would provide a platform for a significant number of voluntary sector agencies. I think, Natalie, you would maybe be better positioned than I to speak authoritatively on that. But it's that type of parenting support programme that we would be trying to generate extra capacity in and around. If we were having this conversation 35 years ago, 40 years ago, there was an expectation upon the old health and social care boards or trusts that they would provide that sort of in-house parenting programme work for parents. But increasingly we've seen that type of work take place in the sort of family support domain through community and voluntary sector partners. Mm-hmm. But it's not straightforward in the community and voluntary sector world either. There are the same challenges in relation to workforce and capacity, and a real need to invest in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just coming in on that, Oisin. The Department of Health obviously have contracted the Parent Line service to us, and we run that service, and it's very focused, and I think I touched on that in my opening remarks. Around positive parenting and trying to educate parents around positive parenting. We know from research that's been carried out in Northern Ireland by NSPCC that attitudes have changed. We know that attitudes towards physical punishment, parents don't think it's acceptable anymore. Only 8% of parents think that physical punishment is an acceptable form of discipline. But parents aren't receiving this information, so we also know that about a third of parents said that they had ever received information on positive parenting. So Parent Line is a really vital service to be able to support parents. And as Oisin says, there are all kinds of difficulties similar to public services as there are in the voluntary and community sector around capacity. The parents that reach us are the lucky ones. We want to be able to reach more parents, and obviously we would need more resources to do that. But the department has been hugely supportive in terms of its support for Parent Line, and we are very, very focused on providing parents with effective strategies that will allow them to parent their children, that is focused on connection and focused on understanding behaviour as a method of communication. There's a lot of work being done, more to do. But parents very much are telling us that this is what they need, this is what they want, and there's the evidence to back that up.
And increasingly, there's a diffuse range of media being used to try to inculcate that messaging out into society. It's no longer the case that you have to have a sort of linear relationship with a social worker or a project worker working within an office setting. Particularly in the years after the coronavirus pandemic, we're seeing an awful lot of information being put out there online and through QR codes and helplines. So we're really thinking progressively about how we percolate the messaging down into society and put resources at people's disposal in diffuse ways that are meaningful to them.
And I suppose the other thing as well, just from a safeguarding perspective, the Safeguarding Board in Northern Ireland, the Department of Health have had conversations with them because they have wider partner agencies. So in terms of, like Dana had mentioned about education being involved, or youth justice, all our different agencies. So I suppose it's multi-agency, multidisciplinary. So we have started to begin conversations, and we've also started to have conversations within our health and social care trusts. But again, because this is very tentative and it's in discussion phases, we can't progress anything further until we know where we go. But there have been discussions.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you all for the response there. It was really comprehensive and I appreciate it, so thank you.
You, Connie. Morris?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation. Any kind of physical or mental violence against a child is wrong and should be stamped out in any way possible. I mean, my daughter had a boy and a girl twins and a wee girl, and I never seen anybody use the naughty step as well in my life. It's unbelievable how obedient they were when they were sitting on the naughty step. But my question, it's just something I'll flag up. What percentage of children who have not been reasonably chastised by a parent gone on to get involved in crime, violent crime or antisocial behaviour, either in the community or in an educational establishment? I think we need to have a counterbalance. The other thing that I think we would need to get right is the education. Look, my grandchildren educated me to put on a seatbelt, because every time they're in the car, Granda, seatbelt. So children have the ability to educate their parents, and if they're going home from an educational establishment and they're telling the parents, Mummy, you can't beat me, Daddy, you can't beat me, you can put me in a naughty step, parents catch on very, very quickly. And the violence that, well, I'm talking about chastisement. I mean, anybody really violent to a child deserves to be prosecuted and incarcerated. But the normal chastisement, if the child is educating the parents from what the child learns at school, it is the best way to go forward. And I just don't think we're investing enough in our education as opposed to all these other agencies that are out there. We need to concentrate on getting the child learned at school, learn the parents through the child. That's it, Chair, and thank you very much, and look forward to the debate in the Chamber.
Thank you. Doug?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation. I think some of the questions have been really, really good. If I can, I'm looking at this from a legislative point of view, if I can, for now, because I think that's what's really important. And I think Brian Kingston made a really good point, is that the Welsh Government have a whole bill covering this because it's so complicated, and yet we're shoehorning in a very small amendment. And I'm not sure that it's covering everything that we need to cover or understand. And that's where my concern is at this moment in time. So I'm not saying I'm against it or for it, just I'm concerned about the legislative vehicle that we're using in this instance. And if I could ask a couple of questions, which will show you where I'm confused, well, not confused, or where there might be confusion. So can I just ask, if you've got a child with special educational needs and they're at the home and they're having a meltdown, I know this, I have a grandson who's like this, and the family has to go into a hold technique, and the hold technique can be viewed as physical punishment. It's not battery, that's going to be a different question, but what do we do in that regard? If that child the next day goes in and says that he was physically punished by his parents, but actually what they were doing is just a hold technique, how do we get around that?
I imagine in practice that would be responded to through a compassionate lens. I think there would be an understanding perspective adopted in relation to a parent who was genuinely trying to contend with a child with complex needs. I think there is an evolving debate in relation to, a wider debate in relation to restrictive practices. But you're absolutely right. There are families out there who are having to contend with very challenging and very complex behaviours. And I think we're aware of the premium that's attached to how we support those families. In a sense, the scenario that you've outlined there is an extension of a wider debate in relation to how we support those families in a way that doesn't unduly stigmatise or differentially treat a parent in that situation. But to cut to the central point that you've put, how would that issue be responded to go back to my opening remark, it would be responded to with compassion. And I think it would be recognised that this was not parenting that was born of abusive intent. This was born of a genuine desire to keep a child safe. And within that context, I think there's an obligation that rests with the trusts, but also with people working in education to develop a supportive matrix around a parent and try to offer support.
And if I can, I think that's a great answer, and I think you're absolutely right. But in practice, that's not always the case. And you will, of course, know that once a teacher suddenly finds that they've been confronted with something like this, and we have legislation which doesn't define it in any great detail, that they will feel a compulsion to maybe go to social services, and then social services feel compulsion then to go to the family, and before you know it, the family feels stigmatized over something they're doing, which you've just outlined is perfectly right in many ways and deserves compassion, but the stigmatization is already there. And I guess the point I'm making is it's not in the amendment. It's now down to something else and a different interpretation. And I have a concern about that. And if I can raise another one then, which I have a concern about.
Just before you do, Doug, Pamela, thanks wanting to come in.
So okay.
In terms of when you're saying about the education will then contact the social worker and then get a referral to social services and the stigma, I suppose that's what we need to try and demystify, because the social workers are there to try and support and help the family. So the referral to social workers might actually trigger a response where actually they can then provide more support to that family and actually in a compassionate way identify that actually there's other things going on. These parents are really struggling to cope, really struggling to manage, and actually then be able to develop pathways and refer them to our voluntary agencies, not into statutory services, but actually to the left, to our voluntary and community sector. So there could be a positive outcome on that.
So go ahead.
I'm just saying there could be a positive outcome to that referral. It's not all negative.
No, absolutely, it's not negative, but I'm kind of maybe looking at the worst case scenario. I've actually seen this happen, and I've seen that that family being stigmatized because of this when the neighbours are looking to see what's going on, and actually I've also seen the police being called to the house for the same reason. So I've seen both ends of what you're saying. So you're absolutely right. My concern is the legislation, the amendment we're talking about here doesn't cover any of this. It's so small, and that goes back to the point I said at the start of what Brian Kingston said. Wales has a whole bill dedicated to this, and we're looking at one amendment. But can I ask another question? Again, I've been really interested in this one. Physical punishment is I don't like it in any shape or form. So I'll lay that on the table. But what about no physical punishment? What about if you scream at your child? What if, because you can't use any form of reasonable chastisement, I'll use that term, you have frustrations and you scream at your child, and that screaming at your child creates the same fear in the child, that same mental stress in the child, that same anxiety in the child, and it's brought about because we're removing reasonable chastisement. How do we deal with that?
Just before you answer that, you're talking to a regimental sergeant major here.
I think we're looking at two sides of the same coin. I think we're looking at parenting that is taking place in conditions of extreme stress. And I think you're looking at a parent who has essentially lost the run of themselves. So it falls into that same operational framework where what you're trying to do is get that parent to, I think the language is take 5, take a step back, reflect upon how they're responding to the situation in front of them. That all sounds lovely. I'm conscious of that. It sounds great in the abstract and sitting here in the comfort of this room. is a million miles away from the stressful situation that an awful lot of parents encounter. And frequently the types of referrals that social services receive in relation to inappropriate chastisement, or as you've outlined, ineffectual and emotionally abusive parenting, they happen in relation to families who have a much broader constellation of needs and vulnerabilities. They frequently are described in intergenerational terms. And I think it's really important that we, as Pamela had said, really try to shift left with those families, engage them in a way that is preventative. Prevention has been part of the ethos of social services since the introduction of the Children's Act and before. But I think what we've seen is, it's sometimes really difficult to ring-fenced resource in and around the preventative part of the overall matrix of services when there's so much emphasis placed upon the safeguarding tradition and the child protection tradition. But those challenges that you've mentioned in relation to stigma, they are well rehearsed within social work circles. Families very frequently do not want to engage with the statutory side of health and social care in that way. So it's really important that we look at our community partnerships, that we look at our partnerships with the community and voluntary sector agencies and the local strategic avenues to provide that support.
And that goes to the positive parenting that we talked about. And look, I get all this. I guess, and if I can remind you, I'm looking at this from a legislative point of view, and what will be kicked out of this amendment if it was to go through. Can I just ask for the panel, what's your definition of battery, as far as this is concerned? What's battery?
Battering is the physical laying on of an implement or hands. It's a term that frankly does not get used in social work practice. I can't speak for colleagues in the area of criminal justice or policing. It used to be a term that was used frequently in the discourse around domestic violence. That's fallen out of fashion because there's a connotation with to be battered and to be labelled a batterer. But I think other people will be better versed than me in relation to the lexicon of the law, but battery, as I understand it, is to inflict physical harm.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to, and I get that. So I'm just trying to get what we're trying to mean by this when we say battery. To me, battery means something else. To me, it means real physical harm, where you could well be leaving strokes or marks on the person who you're hitting, as opposed to the back of your hand on a nappy, type thing. So that's where I was just trying to get to on this. Can I ask one last question again of the panel, please? And again, this is just for myself. We talked about not criminalising parents, but the reality is we could end up criminalising parents. And from the research that I have done, this year alone in Wales, 21% of all the cases that are being looked at in regards to this particular issue, 21% are now with the police, and that's crossed over from the social services support plan as well. But 21% are sitting with the police. So that could be 21% of those parents could be criminalised. And I go to the point that you've made, and I think it was made very well, that there was lots of awareness campaigns around this in Wales. But it worked in Wales because they had a whole bill to deal with it. We're looking at just one amendment, which could have a radical change on society here. And I'm slightly concerned that we don't have enough information to make sure that we're protecting families out there in this case.
If I could just address the point just about the bill. So yes, the Wales and indeed Scotland, they both had standalone acts that abolished the defence. In Wales, I suppose Section 1 of their act, not to just get into all the text of it, Section 1 is fairly similar to the proposed amendment to the Justice Bill here. Section 2 was a duty to provoke for the Welsh Government to promote public awareness, and Section 3 was a duty about reports on how the measures were being implemented, and that's the report that's coming out later this year, and then the one in 2027. Then there was just the power to make regulations and then the coming into force. And so again, it was a fairly short act, and it didn't actually go into the detail of what would constitute battery, etc. Similarly, in Scotland, their act was fairly short at just 5 sections, and again, on a similar basis, there was the abolition of the defence, the duty to raise awareness, and as I understand it, the Children First Act in Ireland as well, that was again, that was an act related to the general welfare of children, but the abolition of the defence of reasonable chastisement was again one clause in that bill, which I think was also moved as an amendment at the time. So just wanted to outline sort of the mechanics in those jurisdictions, and happy to go into further detail if that would be helpful.
Yeah, and look, I get there were short bills. Our amendment's 10 lines. You know, that's what we're talking, just 10 lines, you know, nothing more. So listen, that's been really useful for me. Thank you very much. I mean, I'll say this again. I'm looking at this to make sure that if we agree this amendment, that we're giving enough to parents out there to make sure that a lot of the things that we've been talking about here are covered. But listen, Chair, thank you for your indulgence.
No problem, Ciara.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, panel. And just to declare an interest that I was a family support coordinator for many years in the Greater St Hello area, so I very much know the fantastic work that does be done through Parent Line, but likewise the range of parenting programmes and the vital work of our family support hubs, which I do believe need more investment in resources. It's quite nominal resources, but they do an amazing work. I also do believe that in the north we are an outlier, not just across the UK, but across Europe in relation to this, and I think we're an outlier when it comes to the general public, and I think we've discussed different scenarios here. Even if we see someone generally in public, whether it's yelling and shouting or whatever it is, the general public be upset and annoyed, and it's not something that the general public want to tolerate any longer. And there is a compassionate approach to it, and there is support mechanisms that already exist through the Department of Health and through our communities, and likewise, as Maurice has mentioned, the importance of education as well. And it is, as a granny, it is our grandkids that are coming and telling me many things as well. Just a couple of quick questions in relation to, and we've covered a wee bit of it, but in relation to the implementation of it, what would you propose in relation to a period of time? And I'm conscious of all the layers and structures that already exist in relation to this and where we're at with regard to the implementation of it, if it was to pass. Looking at, and as we've discussed here, there's 3 elements: obviously the legislation itself, the awareness campaign, and the measurement of it.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to have a lead-in period. I think what we've seen in Wales is a significant effort to inculcate the messaging out into society, and there are a number of platforms through which you'll be seeking to do that, through trusts, primary care, MDTs, family support hubs, local arrangements. So I think it's only sensible to have a lead-in period where you are getting that message out into the community. Schools as well. Schools are a vital platform for children. So I think with any sort of shift in the policy canon, it makes sense to me that there would be a run-in period. Now, if you ask me to specify a period, I would have thought that should be measured in months as opposed to any longer than that. But I think that needs to be done in tandem with having something to offer, and having a real sense. And this brings me back to the remark I made earlier on about experience going back 45 years ago in Finland. Really important to get the detail of it right and to clearly delineate people's roles. And Pamela's spoken a wee bit about some of the early discussions that are taking place with SBNI. I imagine there will be discussions as well with colleagues in policing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you've hit at a fundamental truth there about resourcing. And as I said earlier on, we know that our family support hubs, and referrals to family support hubs can range between 17% to 50% for parenting programmes. But 7 of those family support hubs out of 29 across the region are reporting unmet need. So we need to be attentive to that, because whilst the experience in Wales hasn't demonstrated a surge in criminal proceedings, it's probably reasonable to anticipate that there will be a rising demand for that sort of parenting approach within our communities.
And it also need to feed into the joint protocol process. Do you know, if we are getting allegations and there's that threshold on, do you know, of significant harm for interviewing the child or speaking to the family when it meets a certain threshold? So there'll be that joint working between police and social services around threshold, and conversation would need to take place in terms of that level of significant harm when it reaches that, or if it has reached it, or in terms of the conversations around criminalisation, because that's not what we would want to do.
And listening to the way that the conversation is sort of taking place in today's committee hearing, I imagine there might well need to be consideration to how you would frame an intervention programme for a parent who was diverted into that programme through court. Strikes to that point that was made earlier on about, you know, what does a successful intervention look like? And sometimes that will pivot upon a subjective assessment of the calibre of the parent's engagement, but frequently that will also pivot upon a certain percentage of appointments having been attended. You know, but that may in turn demand that there be some engagement with our community and voluntary sector partners, just to reframe the way that those sessions are offered and delivered. And I don't mean that to be a source of additional stigma, but I just think we need to be alert to why a parent would be deflected into that. But again, the big emphasis here, I think, needs to be on prevention.
100%, yeah.
Getting the message out into the communities, getting the message out into families before it ever gets to a point where somebody loses control or finds themselves being referred to the police or social services. And you're absolutely right. You know, school as the engine room of childhood learning. You know, it's really important to get the conversations right in school as well, because that's where the children consolidate their view of the world around them, as well as at home.
Just secondly, I don't know if you can answer this, the Public Prosecution Service has been unable to identify specific cases where the defence of reasonable chastisement would have come into play, and it's not possible to search for this on their case management system. Can you explain maybe what the reason for that would be? I suppose, are you aware why? Or
again, I would probably need to rely on the PPS directly to answer that question. I'm not sure. It could just be something like they don't record it in that particular way and can't pull the information out. As I understand it, it's not, again, as you have said, they can't search for it once case management, so I'm assuming they don't record it by keyword or anything like that. So, but they would probably be better able to explain the whys and wherefores. But again, I'd be happy to try and follow that up.
Okay, thank you. And just a final one. How would you propose, I suppose, where would you see the lead responsibility would be on the governance and accountability of this, if it was to come into being, and perhaps what work would need to be done in regard to measuring the benefits of it? And I know you're not down that line yet, and it is about the cross-departmental working and etc. But just your thoughts on it, where the governance would sit.
I think an important part of the governance framework around the excellent work taken forward by our community and voluntary sector partners is through the Children and Young People Strategic Partnerships, and there is an oversight role in relation to some of the contracts held in the voluntary sector through SPPG. I haven't a well-rehearsed answer to the question, but I imagine those cases that do result in a mandated deflection from court will probably be cases that are open to social work in the trusts. So I imagine that there will be a role for the trusts as well. But in truth, I'm making that remark without that having been discussed with the trust, so it's important to bear that in mind. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Pamela, from the...
I suppose there would also be a record in terms of where cases have went through the criminal process, so the joint protocol, ABE, so there would be a record of that. And I suppose we are looking at the cadre model and the pilot that's going out in the Southern Trust, so if that was part of that, then they could start to begin to think about that and capture data. So if they're being referred and a child's being spoken to and it's agreed single agency or it's agreed joint protocol, whatever, and then where they are directed to, that can then be captured within that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You just the way you answered one of Ciara's questions there has intrigued me. So you talked about the lead-in period being a sensible approach, but you also talked, I think it was Pamela, and you don't have to answer this directly, Pamela, it's open to the group. You talked about a threshold or level of significant harm to identify that threshold. So are you saying there's a reasonable punishment out there?
I think what we're reflecting upon is that there is a threshold in relation to the evidence that policing in particular would feel that they could move forward with a potential prosecution. Significant harm is also a threshold that is summoned into being in public law applications brought by the Health and Social Care Trusts for care orders, where a threshold has been reached that not to sound pedantic, that the harm to the child is at a significant threshold. Mm-hmm. And that threshold is necessarily set quite high. It's a significant burden for the trusts to meet. But in practice, those cases that are referred through, as Pamela said earlier on, they're managed within a joint protocol, a memorandum between social services and police. Mm-hmm. And those cases that result in a very clear delineation of physical injury are very clearly cases where a child has been physically abused and a threshold has been reached to move forward with that.
And what are those people charged with then at that point?
I can't definitively answer that. That's a question that would probably be better posed to somebody within policing.
I'll refer to the actual Article 2 of the law reform, Miscellaneous Provisions Northern Ireland Order 2006 Physical Punishment of Children, which is being repealed in this amendment. So I'm talking in legalese for a reason. Okay. But with regards to that article, they talk about wounding, causing grievous bodily harm with intent, malicious wounding, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, common assault, cruelty to persons under 16. It's modernised with regards to non-fatal strangulation and asphyxiation. So those are the sorts of really serious criminal sanctions that we have to protect our children. So where is the threshold then? Where will the threshold come in? Where will the offence come in for smacking?
I think just under that particular order as well, I think it covers battery. It mentions battery as well. So again, I think the purpose of as I understand it, the law reform miscellaneous provisions order. So it lists those offences which cannot be justified on or defined as reasonable punishment. So I suppose taking the approach there, it's a list of things which cannot be justified on that basis.
How do you prove? How does a social worker or a police officer prove that a child's been smacked?
Well, again, I mean, I don't know that the people in front of you are the best people to answer that question today. Those judgments do pivot upon the types of assessments that are carried out by FMOs and senior doctors. There are some very clear evidences out there of children who have what is very clearly a handprint on their body, or a type of bruise that could only have been inflicted by something like straight or mechanical. Mm-hmm. There is, we're leaning into a very specialist area of medical practice where there are fine judgments made in relation to the site of injuries. Particular areas of injury are red flags as far as senior paediatricians are concerned. But those sorts of distinctions tend to be made through very nuanced work alongside senior doctors and physical examination. It's not for a social worker to make a pronouncement as to whether a clear evidence of physical injury is attributable to an act of chastisement or abuse. That's a decision that would be discussed in that sort of multidisciplinary manner.
Mm-hmm. You may not have seen sight of this, but there was a letter sent from the DALO dated the 31st of October, and it states in it, and I'll read it out, tolerating physical punishment of children also makes it difficult for healthcare professionals and other childcare practitioners to distinguish between children who are routinely abused and children who are largely well cared for. How does it make it more difficult? I can read that out again. Tolerating physical punishment of children, so having this reasonable chastisement, also makes it difficult for healthcare professionals and other childcare practitioners to distinguish between children who are routinely abused and children who are largely well cared for. What does that mean?
Lack of clarity.
Yeah, again, that's in our department's letter. So, what I think that is quoting the report, I think, of the Royal College, and I suppose it's making the point that if there's a defence of reasonable chastisement for those children who are, I suppose, at the moment smacked under the defence of reasonable chastisement is used, it's different. It's sometimes difficult for professionals to differentiate between those cases at the moment and those cases where there's routine abuse. I think that was the point that was being made.
I mean, in practice, assessments of need and risk that are carried out in the social work domain aren't binary. They aren't linear. They will take account of specific incidences or things that happen in extremis. But the assessment framework is sort of wide-ranging and ecological. It explores what's happening for the child in the round, both in terms of issues within the domestic setting at home, but also in terms of the child's physical and emotional development. Those assessments reach out and ask questions of professionals in other professions as well, particularly education, public health, nursing. So there is no rush to judgment in relation to a referral that comes in the door of a child who has been alleged to have been physically harmed by a parent. There is an attempt to understand things in the round. Having clarity in relation to the defence of reasonable chastisement would be helpful to remove that part of the overall conversation about what has happened. But to go back to the point that's been made on a number of occasions earlier on, the intent here and some of the dismantling of the stigma around the role of social services is not to arrive at a position where parents can be vilified or prosecuted. It is genuinely about trying to be preventative and responding proportionately and with practice wisdom. Where thresholds have been met and children have been harmed, then that is relatively straightforward to delineate. But it happens on a multi-professional basis, and it happens with the correct medically qualified people being in the room.
In Scotland, we've recited some of the problems in Scotland with regards to the Royal Assent implementation. But in that same letter dated the 31st of October, it states, we understand that at the time the lack of an implementation period generated some criticism, especially from police and social workers who were left to deal with the impact of the change in law. Can you provide details of the impact on the social workers and police and what's meant by that?
Yeah, I think certainly in respect of social services and Scotland, I think there was an initial spike in cases. Don't have the exact number, and that's something we will be looking at as part of our preparation if and when this comes in.
I think it's about that criminalisation of parents and clarity of trying to work with the family. So we've got new legislation in, so do we have to then go down this draconian route, or what was the context of it, how did it happen, and what's best for this family? So is it going down a criminal route, or is it better that actually we put this family on a family support pathway and give them support? So it's probably that, trying to work out where they sat.
And I assume something dangerous, I know it is. 2020, there's a spike in child protection cases during lockdown.
Yep.
So how can we be sure the spike in child protection cases was down to the removal of the reasonable chastisement or punishment law or relief or lockdown philosophy?
I think we've seen a lot of things happen during lockdown, not just a spike in relation to child protection. I think we are reflecting in 2025 upon parents and families having been under an inordinate amount of stress during that period, and in particular the decision to close down schools. It compressed an awful lot of stress and pressure into the domestic setting. I'd be reluctant to rush to judgment about figures coming out of Scotland, but certainly within the child and adolescent mental health world and within the child with disability world, we've seen that period of time being hugely significant and resulting in parents in particular being placed under an inordinate amount of pressure. And in particular, talking about children with more complex needs, it needs to be borne in mind that school is much more than a place where they attend for education. School is a site where a sort of multidisciplinary range of services are frequently delivered. The loss of that structure and the loss of that particular nurturing environment during lockdown has had a significant impact upon children and their families. So I think that needs to be borne in mind. It's a pressure cooker environment you're looking at.
If I could just add, Chair, and I suppose we saw the opposite here in 2020. So we saw a drop in the child protection figures in Northern Ireland. So much so, in fact, that NSPCC and the Department of Health launched a joint campaign to try and encourage tradespeople and taxi drivers and people who still were going into homes to report safeguarding concerns. So actually, you know, that was a really worrying sign, because we knew that there were lots of children at home at that time who were in unsafe homes. And so people were very concerned in Northern Ireland about that reduction in the number of child protection referrals here. So I suppose the situation in Scotland is marked because of that difference, because there was that increase in 2020.
And the preventative end of what was available through social services, you know, prior to the pandemic, an awful lot of the preventative parenting work would have taken place in the form of group work sessions, where maybe you were able to engage up to 15 families and make real inroads to your waiting list. Whereas during lockdown, you had to try to think of novel ways of trying to engage a smaller group of families, maybe using tablets or things like MS Teams, but it's no substitute. You know, there is something about being in the same room as a parent and giving them an opportunity to engage in that way. So there were a number of consequences during that period.
You're certainly turning. Sorry, Ciara, you want to come in?
Yeah, just one final just question to yourselves, particularly from the Department of Health. We can very much see the positive impacts this would have on children. We can very much see the positive impact with investment in family support hubs for parents in parenting and positive parenting. Could you just enlighten me, if this was to be implemented, what could be the positive impact in relation to social services, the social team, children's services in the long term? What's your thoughts?
There's a couple of things. I suppose we're always working in grey. As a social work practitioner, things can be grey. So this becomes much more black and white for practitioners on the ground, you know, and then they can start from a baseline moving forward. I don't know.
I think there's something in it about how legislation offers a prism through which society's values are refracted. And there's a wider conversation that we're all a part of in various ways and at various levels about the place that violence has in our society and what sort of society we want to be a part of generating for the future. I think attitudes in relation to physical chastisement of children are changing anyway. I think support of physical chastisement is exponentially decreasing year upon year upon year. But we do know that, you know, Northern Ireland has a very worrying rate of domestic homicides. There is a considerable amount of work being carried forward by Pamela and her colleagues in relation to the violence against women and girls strategy. And there is something about trying, I don't want to be gendered about it, but I think we need to try to introduce into early childhood experience that, you know, it's not okay for anyone to get hit here. It's not okay for anyone to hit me, and it's certainly not okay for me to lash out with violence or physical intent toward anyone else. So, you know, if we manage to promote healthier messaging and around that, then maybe we will start to see that have an impact upon the types of issues that social services are contending with in the longer term.
Just one wee final one. We're all well aware of trauma-informed practice and the amount of training now across all departments, which is great to see. Currently, the defence of chastisement, would you see that as a tick box when it comes to one of the traumas, adverse childhood experiences that one would experience? If you were, as we all know, there's a scoring matrix and you took how many of your 4 more adverse childhood experiences. Is slapping, physical punishment an adverse childhood experience?
Speaking personally, I think it is. I think you have to ask the question, why would a child who has been smacked amend their behaviour? It wouldn't be because they had learned anything, other than that they will suffer pain as a consequence of continuing with that behaviour. They haven't been encouraged to reflect. They haven't been encouraged to develop an internal working model where they recognise the impact of their behaviour upon others. And ultimately, I think, speaking on behalf of the child, I think the child would experience it as something that was an unwelcome intrusion. There is a remark that's made, and I think it might have been Doug had said earlier on about, the people who say, well, it never did me any harm. Well, frequently the people who get to say that are people who are in a fairly privileged position. There's a silent cohort of children out there who don't have that voice. In my view, I do appreciate this as
I suppose from a children's organisation's perspective, the evidence base is really conclusive at this stage. It shows absolutely conclusively that physical punishment is damaging to children on a whole range of fronts. It can cause lifetime issues in terms of mental health, increased aggression, a whole range. I mean, we know this now. We're not in the position that we were 20 years ago. We're much, much more informed in terms of the impact of physical punishment on children. So not only is it damaging and can be lifelong damage, cause lifelong damage to children, but it's also a key risk factor for physical abuse. So on your last point as well, Ciara, just in terms of what is the impact for social services here, it's a particular issue for Northern Ireland though, because 84% of our children here who are on the Child Protection Register are on the register because of physical abuse and neglect. So if we want to address one of our key issues in terms of why children here are on the Child Protection Register, we need to break that link between physical punishment and physical abuse. The other thing that I would really like to say is that children who are physically punished are some of our most vulnerable groups of children. We often think of older teenagers here, but actually research shows us from across the world, including really recently World Health Organization research, that children who are physically punished are in the main age between 2 and 4. These are very young kids. We're not talking about teenagers, and we're not talking about older children. We're talking about the most vulnerable children. In terms of the link between physical abuse, the damage, we now know all of this. And so a change to the legislation would make a big difference to social services if we could break that link,
And it's the messaging, we're talking end of violence against women and girls, so it's not okay for mum or dad to be beaten, but it's okay as a parent for us to chastise our children. So it's a mixed message within a home as well in terms of how children are being brought up and taught and what we're trying to do publicly in terms of ending violence.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. You've well over an hour there, nearly an hour and a half, so we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for answering all of our questions, and it was a very, very worthwhile session, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, we're going to move on quickly then. Members are content. Agenda item number 6 then is the Justice Bill written papers, 6.1 and 6.2, Department of Justice responses regarding crime and policing bill, second LCM, barred and advisory list. Can I refer members to pages 126 to 130 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? Can I remind members that at its meeting on the 9th of October, the committee considered a paper from the department providing an update on developments in relation to the second LCM for the crime and policing bill. That paper advised the committee that the inclusion of provisions of the bill for barred and advisory lists of the PSNI would not be possible due to constraints in drafting capacity at Westminster. The committee agreed to ask the Department if there would be any scope to bring these provisions forward via an amendment to the Justice Bill or as part of either of the other two planned pieces of legislation in this mandate. Can I inform members that the committee initially received the response at item 6.2, which is page 129, advising that it would not be the Minister's intention to table such an amendment to the Justice Bill, which the Department subsequently advised that it wished to recall. The revised letter then at 6.1, page 126, confirming that the Minister does now intend to bring forward an amendment to create provision for barred and advisory lists for all law enforcement bodies in Northern Ireland, was received shortly afterwards. Can I inform members that Standing Orders 46.8 states no document received by the clerk of a committee shall be withdrawn or altered without the knowledge and approval of the committee. It was therefore necessary for the initial response at item 6.2 to be included in the meeting pack in order to seek the committee's approval for its withdrawal. So can I ask members if they're content that the letter at 6.2 is withdrawn, which was the one sent in error?
Right, so just because that's what I was going to clarify, the contradictory emails. So
Yes.
the Minister is now confirming that she is going to bring it forward. Oh, and there's a letter to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
Sorry, Chair, that letter confirming is at 6.1.
Yes, that's
And
we're withdrawing the other one.
the other one was withdrawn, and there's confirmation actually. There's another letter to come on an update on the LCM, which again confirms this point, and that'll be in next week's pack too.
Thank you.
So we as a committee had asked for that, and the Minister has obliged, albeit with that wee bit of confusion. So can I ask members if they are content to note the response at 6.2 confirming the intention to bring forward an amendment on the Justice Bill to create the barred and advisory list, or if any further information or clarification is sought at this time? Happy enough to wait the next week?
Yep.
Then 6.3, Department of...
Excuse me.
We should try a Justice Committee with a soundtrack. I think that would be...
Good
but
idea.
I would rather have classical music, Patsy. Yeah. 6.3,
Sure,
Department of
wouldn't
Justice
say, just
response
right to this,
regarding Justice Bill Clause 28. Taxation figures, restrictions on ordering taxation in legal aid costs. Can I refer members to page 131 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? Can I remind members that at its meeting on the 9th of October, the committee agreed to ask the Department of Justice for updated statistical data and figures for ordering taxation of legal aid costs for the past 3 years as part of its consideration of Clause 28 of the Justice Bill. Can I inform members that the Department has now responded to that request, providing figures for the number of legal aid only bills assessed, the total amount claimed, the number of bills with amounts taxed off, the number of bills changed, and the total amounts taxed off for 22, 23 and 24. Can I ask members if they are content to note the response or if they require any further information or clarification? Members content then? 6.4, Police Service of Northern Ireland, response regarding community resolution notices. Refer members to pages 135 to 143 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers. Can I remind members that at its meeting on the 16th of October, in which it heard oral evidence from Northern Ireland Alternatives and the Community Restorative Justice Ireland, the committee agreed to ask the PSNI for a response to a number of questions regarding community resolution notices. Can I inform members that the PSNI has now provided a response which provides procedural and operational information on the issues of CRNs? Can I ask members if they are content to note the response or if they require any further information or clarification at this stage, Deirdre?
Just to see if we could forward this correspondence to both organisations since it was an issue they raised, and just to see if there's anything they want to come back on.
Okay. Content with that?
Okay?
Members agreed?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Go on ahead, Brian.
I mean, their main concern was that they felt they could be an agency, you know, that people were referred to, and they weren't getting those referrals. I mean, I think it was, you know, less than 5, you know, that they were getting, and they felt that was a role that they expected would come to them and that they could be effective. And I think, you know, we all recognise their role within the community. So I don't think that's dealt with in the correspondence, scanning through it. But again, I think if we forward it on to those organisations, let them come back. Because a feeling that they had a role where they could make a positive difference, but weren't being given the opportunity.
Yep. Okay. Ciara?
It'd be good to know, obviously I welcome now that the PSNI have this out of courts disposal policy team. It'd be useful to know who the contact is for that team. Likewise, if that could be found out, because I'm sure it's something CRJ and Alternatives would also appreciate.
Okay, I'd be surprised if they didn't have it, but we'll seek that out. Okay, 6.5. Sean Moran response regarding Justice Bell call for evidence. Can I refer members to page 144 to 145 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? Can I inform members that the committee has received further correspondence from an individual regarding their response to the committee's Justice Bell call for evidence? The correspondence makes specific reference to a recommendation in an earlier Health Committee report that the restriction for a voluntary sector from providing secure care accommodation should be lifted. Could I ask members if they would wish to ask the Department of Health for information on any action that was taken in respect of that recommendation, or if any other information is required in relation to the correspondence? First of all, are you happy that we seek that out from the Department of Health?
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Any other aspects of that letter that you'd want to raise, or are you content? Happy enough?
Yep.
6.6 then, Justice Bell request for further information. Can I refer members to pages 146 to 180 of the meeting pack, which contains the document prepared by the committee team to track committee requests and responses received in respect of the Justice Bill and the proposed amendments. So can I seek members' agreement to note that, the list of requests and responses? Can I advise members then that the next 3 items on the agenda relate to the separate but related statutory roles that have been laid by the Department of Justice? A single memo which covers all 3 of the SRs is at page 182 to 185 of the meeting pack. However, in order for the committee to consider whether or not it is content with each of the statutory roles, each SR will be considered as a separate item. So, agenda item number 7 in SR 2025-166, the enforcement of fines and other penalties amendment regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. Can I refer members to pages 186 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? Can I inform members that the SR 2025-166 amends the enforcement of fines and other penalty regulations Northern Ireland 2018. The statutory rule will increase the levels of charges set by the Department in relation to the removal, storage and disposal of seized vehicles in specified circumstances by 28% to reflect inflation and the increased operational costs from 2008 and to maintain parity with England and Wales. Specific details of the amended removal, storage and disposal charges for each vehicle category is set out in paragraphs 3 to 5 of the statute rule. Can I remind members that at its meeting on the 9th of October, the committee agreed that it was content with the Department of Justice proposal for the statute rule. The Department has confirmed that there has been no policy changes to the content of the rule since the proposal was considered by the committee. The examiner of statutory rules has no comments to make on the technical aspects of the rule in her report on the 21st of October 25. So can I ask members that the rule be is subject to negative resolution procedure and will come into operation on the 10th of November 2025. Sorry, the 10th of November. Can I ask members if they are content with the statutory rule? If so, I'll put the question. That the Committee for Justice has considered SR 2025-166, the enforcement of fines and other penalties amendment regulations Northern Ireland 2025, and has no objections to the rule. Agreed? Agenda item number 8 then is SR 2025-167, the Criminal Justice Northern Ireland Order 2008, retention and disposal of seized motor vehicles amendment regulations Northern Ireland 2025. Can I refer members to pages 203 to 209 of the meeting pack? Inform members that the SR 2025-167 amends the Criminal Justice Northern Ireland Order 2008, retention and disposal of seized motor vehicles regulations Northern Ireland 2008. Similar to the previous SR, the rule will increase the levels of fees set by the Department in relation to the removal and storage of vehicles in specified circumstances by 28% to reflect inflation and increased operational costs from 2008 and to maintain parity with England and Wales. Specific details of the amended fees are set out in the statutory rule. Can I remind members that at its meeting on the 9th of October, the committee agreed that it was content with the proposal of the statutory rule. The Department has confirmed that there have been no policy changes to the content of the rule since the proposal was considered by the committee, and the examiner of statutory rules has no comment to make on the technical aspects of the rule in a report on the 21st of October 25. Can I advise members that the rule is subject to the negative resolution procedure and will come into operation on the 10th of November 2025. So can I ask members if they're content with the statutory rule? If so, I'll put the question. that the Committee for Justice has considered SR 2025-167, the Criminal Justice Northern Ireland Order 2008, Retention and Disposal of Seized Motor Vehicles Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2025, and has no objections to the rule. Agreed?
Agreed.
Moving on to the third one then, agenda item number 9, SR 2025-168, the Road Traffic Northern Ireland Order 1981, Retention and Disposal of Seized Motor Vehicles Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2025. Refer members to pages 211 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers. Can I inform members that the SR 2025-168 amends the Road Traffic Northern Ireland Order 1981, the Retention and Disposal of Seized Motor Vehicles Regulations Northern Ireland 2008. Like the previous two SRs, it will increase the levels of fees set by the Department in relation to the removal and retention of seized vehicles in specified circumstances by 28% to reflect inflation and increased operational costs from 2008 and to maintain parity with England and Wales. Again, the specific details of the amended fees are set out in the statutory rule. Can I remind members that at its meeting on the 9th of October, the committee agreed that it was content with the proposal for the statutory rule. The Department has confirmed that there has been no policy changes to the content of the rule since the proposal was considered by the committee, and the examiner of statutory rules has no comment to make on the technical aspects of the rule in her report on the 21st of October. So can I advise members that the rule is subject to negative resolution procedure and will come into operation on the 10th of November 2025. So if I can ask members if they are content with the statutory rule. If so, I will put the question that the Committee for Justice has considered SR 2025-168, the Road Traffic Northern Ireland Order 1981, Retention and Disposal of Seized Motor Vehicles Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2025, and has no objections to the rule. Agreed? Yep. Agenda item number 10 then, Northern Ireland Troubles Bill, the Legislative Consent Memorandum laid under Standing Order 42A 4B. Can I refer members to page 200 to 205 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? Can I inform members that the Justice Minister has written to the committee regarding the recent introduction of the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill in Westminster? The Minister has advised that the vast majority of the Bill's clauses engage devolved matters, though the policy intent, legislative design and financial consequences of the Bill have all been determined by the UK Government. The Minister advises that the Bill confers a range of responsibilities on the Northern Ireland Judiciary, justice agencies and ALBs, which are currently unfunded, and the Department has no policy, legislative or financial control over any aspect of the Bill. Therefore, the Minister has stated that she cannot support the Bill's introduction in its current terms. In addition, the Department is already managing a significant legislative programme and does not have the capacity to divert resources and set aside the existing priorities to progress UK Government policy initiatives. The Minister would also require consent from executive colleagues to table any legislative consent motion, and she has advised that there has not been adequate time to obtain this at this juncture. Can I inform members that on that basis, the Minister has advised that she plans to lay a memorandum under Standing Order 42A 4B before the Assembly, explaining why a legislative consent motion is not sought, at least at this time. The Minister has advised that the Department will keep the Committee closely informed of any further developments in relation to this particular bill. Deirdre, you want to come in on this?
Yeah, it was just to say I concur with the Minister's sentiments on this. I mean, I think it's farcical that the British and Irish governments have agreed a legacy framework. The British government is moving legislation, but they're saying that we have to pick up the bill for all of this, particularly when we know, and it's been highlighted in the Chamber, the pressures that the Justice Department are under. We know that with inquiries like the OMA inquiry, the pressure that that's putting on policing, and without the adequate resources to come with this impending legislation, then it's not going to be done, or some investigations or areas of work are going to be lifted over others. And we know, looking at the legacy mechanisms that were running until the last legislation put a stop to it, that it is at significant cost. So I suppose it's just to reiterate at this point that I would agree with what the Minister has outlined in her correspondence. And we need to continue to find a way of engaging with the British government, but with both governments, that resourcing needs to come along with any outcome in terms of how we address these matters.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments, or are we content to note the paper at this point, Brian?
If it's not been implemented locally, does that mean the ICRIR continues its operation?
So
or will it be still be changed?
So LCMs are funny, or not even moving LCM is funny, because ultimately the sovereign government here is the UK, so they can implement any legislation that they pose, whether the Assembly wants it or not, whether we as individual MLAs want it or not, they can still do that. So.
But does it not operate under TEO? But
I'm not sure.
Aye. Okay.
Honestly, don't know that. Are you content to note the paper at this stage anyway? The Minister has agreed to keep us up to speed on these things. Okay. Agenda item number 11, legal aid remuneration proposals, Department of Justice written paper. Can I refer members to pages 227 to 237 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? Can I inform members that the Department of Justice advised of its intention to progress phase 2 and 3 of the early engagement project, which aims to streamline how police, prosecution, defence and courts interact by way of a pilot. The pilot will operate in Antrim's Magistrates Court under the auspices of a working group co-chaired by the Director of Public Prosecutions and Mr Justice Fowler. The proposals for the pilot are based upon aspects of the Better Case Management BCM principles, which have been in operation in England and Wales since 2015, and the Department advises that the development and implementation of BCM principles has a potential to deliver substantial benefits in tackling avoidable delay. The pilot will commence on the 4th of February 2026 and is likely to run until the planned commencement of direct committal, which will be in November 2026. Cases eligible for the pilot are charge cases with one or more indictable only charge and any related hybrid cases with a recommendation for prosecution on indictment. It is envisaged that the case will be prosecuted at Antrim Crown Court. So can I inform members that this is new work in the Magistrates Court which requires a fee. As this is a pilot with a very short implementation period, it is proposed that the new BCM pilot fee is given effect by way of a direction rather than a legislative amendment. The Department has advised that it has taken similar approaches to previous pilots in the past. Cases within the scope of the BCM pilot will be granted a limited criminal aid certificate solely for work covered under the pilot. A copy of the direction is provided at item 11.2, which is in pages 232 to 234. The Department advises it will conduct a short targeted consultation with statutory consultees from 10th of November 2025 to the 5th of December 25 on the draft direction in respect to legal aid remuneration only, supported by impact assessments. Subject to consultation and financial approval, the pilot is forecast to cost £35,000 per annum of legal aid costs. It is envisaged that costs will be met through the Speeding Up Justice programme. These costs are not linked to the 16% uplift for legal aid remuneration, which is covered by the separate business case that incorporates the wider Enabling Access to Justice programme. So can I ask members if they are content to note the paper or if any information or clarification is required at this stage? Members content? Item number 11.3, Department of Justice response to legal aid. Can I remind members that the committee has written to request further information on the discussions with stakeholder in the legal profession on the impact that the delay in progressing the uplift to fees is having, and for further clarity on the time frame for completion of the business case. Can I inform members that the Department's response can be found at pages 235 of the meeting pack? Can I ask members if they are content to note the response or if any further information or clarification is required at this stage? Yep, Deirdre.
Just a point of frustration just with the uplift, Chair, because it will be next month a year when the initial statement was made. And it was uplift in terms of inflation. Is there now going to be calls for a further uplift by the time this one's implemented? But I think we're having an oral briefing soon, aren't we, on these issues more broadly, so we could maybe raise it at that.
Yep, okay, I'm content with that. Members content to move on. Agenda item number 12 then is 5-year plan, draft Department of Justice plan. Written paper. Can I refer members to page 238 to 311 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? Can I inform members that the Department of Justice has forwarded to the committee a copy of its draft 5-year departmental plan, which was submitted to the Department of Finance last month. The Department of Finance had required departments to set out their strategic direction over a 5-year period, 25-26 to 29-30, including projected resource and capital DEL requirements. Departments were asked to identify the potential gap in funding and to consider possible actions to rectify the gap. Can I inform members that DOJ have advised that this is the first iteration of the departmental plan, and it is envisaged that it will be developed and updated on an annual basis. It is intended, therefore, that the plan will remain as draft until multi-year budgets are set by the executive and the budget allocation details have been updated accordingly in the plan before it is finalised and published as part of the budget consultation process. The draft 5-year plan includes an executive summary which highlights a number of key findings that include the growing funding gap, the demand-led pressures such as rising legal aid costs and low PSNI numbers, the growing pay costs, the capital investment needs, and the limited discretionary spend, among other areas. Can I inform members that the Department has asked that the Committee consider the draft 5-year departmental plan and advised it would welcome any feedback that members may have. Can I seek members' views on the draft 5-year plan? I suppose the first thing to say is that we welcome any long-term strategic thought with regards to budgets. That's the first thing. Anybody else want to add to that? Okay, are we content at the minute then to note the paper? Okay, and maybe just welcome it then, that we have it. We have a more strategic way forward. Agenda item number 13 then is personal injury discount rate. Consultation on how inflation is taken into account in setting of rate. Department of Justice written paper. Can I refer members to page 312 to 333 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? Can I inform members that the Committee has received a written paper from the Department of Justice advising of its intention to run a public consultation on options for providing more flexibility in how inflation is allowed for by the Government Actuary when reviewing the personal injury discount rate. This fulfils a commitment made by the Department following the outcome of a consultation on the parameters for the 2024 review of the discount rate. The draft consultation paper is available at pages 318 to 333 of the meeting pack. Can I inform members that the consultation paper first asks if in principle the Damages Act 1996 should provide more flexibility in relation to how the impact of inflation is to be taken into account by the Government Actuary when setting the discount rate. The paper then discusses and asks for views on 2 options for providing more flexibility. That's prescribing an index such as CPI in the 1996 Act with the ability for the rate setter to apply an adjustment to that index, and prescribing both an index and an adjustment, for example CPI plus or minus or plus 0.5% in the 1996 Act, with the ability for the Department, subject to the approval of the Assembly, to amend either element by secondary legislation. So can I inform members that the Department advises that it intends to publish a consultation paper as soon as possible for a period of 10 weeks to take account of the Christmas period, and depending on the outcome of the consultation, it is intended that any legislation to amend the 1996 Act will be taken forward in the next mandate, subject to the views of the incoming Minister and the Executive. So can I ask members if they are content to note the paper and to consider further when the outcome of the consultation and way forward are available, or if any other information or clarification is sought at this time? It's a very complicated area. Yeah. Agenda item number 14, correspondence. Can I inform members that there is a correspondence memo and 20 items of correspondence at pages 336 to 562 in the meeting pack? Can I advise members that I will draw their attention to 10 of the items, and they will then have an opportunity to comment on any other items of correspondence in which they have a particular interest. Item 14.4, refer members to page 350 of the meeting pack, which contains a call for evidence of all statutory committees on the Water, Sustainable Drainage and Flood Management Bill from the Committee for Infrastructure. Can I inform members that the Clerk of the Infrastructure Committee has requested that all committee responses, including nil responses, be sent to the committee by the 13th of November. Can I ask members if they are content to submit a nil response? Okay. Items number 14.5 and 14.6, can I refer members to pages 413 to 429 of the meeting pack? which contains correspondence from an individual regarding a personal matter forwarded to the committee by the Committee of the Executive Office, and further correspondence directly to this committee from that same individual regarding the same personal matter. Can I remind members that the committee has agreed that all future correspondence from this individual on a personal matter will be to note unless it raises new issues relevant to the committee's role. So can I seek members' agreement to respond to the committee for the Executive Office outlining the committee's agreed position on this matter? Agreed?
Right.
Item then 14.1.1. Can I refer members to page 493 of the meeting pack, which contains further correspondence from an individual? Can I remind members that at its meeting on the 16th of October, members had considered correspondence from this individual to the Department of Justice seeking a response to a number of questions the individual had raised. At that meeting, the committee had agreed to request a copy of the department's response to this individual as a first step, and will decide if it wishes to consider the matter further when that response has been received. The individual was advised by the clerk of this position. Can I inform members that the individual has now issued further correspondence to the committee on the matter, including several questions and further areas of interest that the individual wishes the department address in their response, and requested that the committee ensure that the department's response addresses the matters raised. Can I seek members' views on whether they wish to forward those specific questions to the department for response? I have no problems with that, but that wasn't the initial request or ask to the department. So it might not come back in the one go, but we're happy enough to do that. Agreed?
There may well be raised expectations that we can make assurances on behalf of the department there.
No, well, this is
it.
So,
he seems to think that that's maybe the way it works.
Yeah, it's not, and you know, we'll have to. We can certainly pose those questions because they might be relevant in an operational sense. But whatever we get back, we'll pass on. Items 14.12. Refer members to pages 513 of the meeting pack, which contains correspondence from an individual concerning a personal matter regarding the PSNI handling of a workplace assault. Can I advise members that the individual has forwarded additional pictures, including X-rays, have been received. Members should contact the committee office if they wish to receive a copy of the pictures. Can I seek members' agreement to reply to the individual advising that it cannot intervene in or investigate or adjudicate on individual cases, and that the individual may wish to contact their MLA? Yeah.
I don't know if it's also just saying that he can also go to seek legal advice or the police
ombudsman. Yeah.
The same post him on those other.
Yeah. I'm happy enough for that. Content with that. Members, yeah. Okay, items 14.14. Can I refer members to page 540 of the meeting pack, which contains correspondence from an individual regarding a personal matter. The committee has received correspondence from the individual on previous occasions. Can I seek members' agreement to again respond to the individual advising that the committee cannot intervene and investigate or adjudicate on individual cases? Members agreed?
Agreed.
Items 14.15. Can I refer members to pages 545 of the meeting pack, which contains correspondence from Patsy McGlowan, our very own Patsy McGlowan, requesting that the committee discuss a decision by the Victims Pension Board, the VPB, not to make an award to an individual. Can I invite Patsy to speak on this matter?
Just, if I could on this, Chair, it's maybe not for addressing today because what I've asked is, and I met with the Victims Pension Payments Board people on Tuesday there, whenever they had a session in the Assembly, and I've asked for further details around the determination itself, which would probably be, because she's not on her own, this lady's not on her own. I don't know it's Westminster legislation, but it might be helpful if we got further details of the determination itself so that we could look into it as a committee and see what conceivably we would do, because, as I say, there are others who are, well, the circumstances aren't exactly the same, but there are others who are similarly affected because of the legislation. So if and when I get that, I've asked for release of that and authority to release that documentation, I'll bring it back to the committee if that's all right.
So you don't want to act now at this stage?
Not today, not till we get this other information, if that's okay.
I suppose the only thing I would say, Pat, said to worry about what this committee could do.
Accept that.
You'll manage that hope and expectation, and I know. Deirdre, you want to come in?
The lady, she knows that too. I've explained that to her.
Okay.
This has come up before at the committee as well, and there's many people that actually aren't getting good treatment from this process. In cases even where two siblings, where the board will say, well, one viewed it and the other didn't because they were asleep when they were being carried out as a younger child. I mean, just crazy stuff. Or And it's the discriminatory nature, maybe the unintended consequence, particularly around women, and how often maybe in these scenarios they were held back at the scene. And then that means a scenario then that they don't get. But, you know, somebody from the emergency services who then seen the person does. So it just seems really, you know, a lot of unintended consequences. So I know we had written before the TEO. This was obviously when Joanne was in place and Justin and stuff as well. I know they had done oral hearings with some of the support organisations, and then also with the board themselves. So I would even, could we share some of the correspondence without maybe divulging personal details, and even just get any feedback from them around where things are sitting on this. And then also with the legislation, I mean, does that, even clarity from the department on, does that have to be changed in terms of some of these processes at Westminster? Or are there things that can be done here locally through the devolved assembly? So just a bit of clarity, because I'm getting this more and more from families that are being impacted, or even those that have to nearly strip again to show their injuries, even though it's clearly on their medical files. So there's definitely concerns, and I think even in the previous correspondence on 14.13, I know there's a judicial review. I think it'll be interesting to see the outcome of that judicial review as well, and even I don't know how we could be kept updated of that, just because that may change things also once that's heard and once there's a determination on it.
Okay, so
Thanks, Chair.
Very clear steer there. You're wanting us to ask the Justice Department what process they have, if any, in the process.
Yeah, I think it's to change any of it, you know, in terms of the implementation of the scheme, or does that have to be a legislative change, and is that Westminster? Yeah.
Okay. Also, with release of that documentation, hopefully we'll get relatively soon, that may well inform that.
Yes, sure. Right, okay.
Which aspects of the law are pertinent and relevant and have led to such an unfair outcome for the people. Because Mary explained to me that the judge was extremely sympathetic, but he said there's nothing I can do here.
Yeah, okay.
So,
and Deirdre would be writing in a general sense, not a specific case.
Yeah,
okay. Members content with that? Happy enough at this stage?
okay.
Okay, items 14.17. Can I refer members to page 551 of the meeting pack, which contains correspondence from the Northern Ireland Judicial Appointments Commission, NIJAC. Can I remind members that an event had been arranged for members of this committee and the Executive Office Committee for the 17th of November. However, NIJAC has advised that given that few members confirmed their attendance, it has made the decision not to proceed with the event. Instead, NIJAC has proposed that commissioners and senior staff meet individuals or with members, or in small groups or party groups. So can I seek members' views on whether they wish to meet formally as a committee with members of NIJAC for such an engagement session, or if they wish to engage with NIJAC directly or make suitable arrangements to meet individually or on a party basis. Any thoughts on this?
Sure. I mean, can we have an informal session with them? I mean, I've done that in some other committees that I'm involved in, or was involved in. I mean, that was arranged for a Monday morning, you know, which wasn't good timing for us.
No.
I mean, most of us will have group meetings, you know, on a Monday morning, so just the
I,
timing was poor, but if we can find a time, we
you're
could have
happy
an
enough
extra
to
briefing.
do it as a committee, trying
Well,
to organise
I'm
some
content
as a
too.
committee.
Yeah.
And then it means it actually takes the hassle off us as individuals to try and arrange things either as an individual or party basis. So we'll put the burden on the clerk and the staff.
Chair, what we could possibly
no flies on you guys.
What we could possibly look at is maybe an informal lunch, like was done with the LCJ
lunchtime.
previously. Tuesday lunchtime, exactly, Brian. Now this was arranged with the Executive Office Committee in the first instance. So if members wish, we could reach out to them as well and invite members from that committee too.
Yeah, have enough of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Item 14.18. Could I refer members to page 552 of the meeting pack, which contains an invitation from the Bar of Northern Ireland to the Rule of Law in Perspective event and panel on understanding the rule of law at the Inn of Court, Belfast, on the 12th of November 2025. Can I advise members that, should they wish to attend, they should RSVP via the email address in the correspondence. Item 14.19. Can I refer members to pages 555 to the meeting pack, which contains an invitation from the Evangelical Alliance to their Igniting response to the Lost Boys Crisis of Northern Ireland event, exploring how policy, community support and early intervention can improve long-term outcomes for young men. Can I advise members that the event is taking place tonight at 7 p.m. in Ulster Temple? This was emailed to members previously to enable them to register via the link in the correspondence if they wish to attend. Can I ask members whether they are content to note the other items of correspondence as set out in the memo, or whether they have any comments to make? All okay? Yep, thank you. Agenda item number 15, forward work programme. Item 15.1, committee draft forward work programme. Can I advise members that the draft committee forward work programme is at pages 564 to 569 of the meeting pack? Can I advise members that there will be 2 sessions on the proposed vagrancy amendment at next week's meeting, followed by an oral evidence session of the strategic framework for youth justice. While it is not usual for the committee to have 3 evidence sessions at one meeting, it has been necessary to schedule the bill sessions in an effort to ensure that the committee has heard as much evidence as possible before the PSNI session, which is scheduled for the 27th of November. Regrettably, ACC McNally will not be available for either of the 2 meetings in December, should a second session with the PSNI be required, so instead it will have to take place on the 15th of January. That's if we need the 2 sessions. Department officials have been asked to confirm if they are available on both dates in December. This should allow the committee to begin its formal deliberations in January, unless members indicate that there are any other stakeholders that they wish to hear from. Members, just a wee bit of a warning, because we have 3 next week, 3 presentations, I will be a bit tighter, because we couldn't really afford to have an hour-and-a-half session each one, if you don't mind. So can I seek members' agreement to the forward work programme? Members agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, agenda item number 16, chairperson's business. Can I advise members that I have no chairperson's business? Agenda item number 17, any other business? Are members any other business?
No, Chair.
No. Agenda item number 18, and it's date, time and place of next meeting, which will take place on Thursday the 13th of November 2025 at 2 p.m. in room 30 Parliament Buildings. I declare the meeting adjourned.